At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. So H.P. Lovecraft, I'm sure, probably needs no introduction, a pioneer of the subgenre of cosmic horror to the extent that it is also referred to synonymously as Lovecraftian horror, and he was possibly the greatest writer to come out of the pulp magazines of the early 20th century. But another thing which H.P. Lovecraft pioneered, in which subsequent authors, most notably perhaps like Stephen King, have adopted, is the concept of a shared universe where all or nearly all of his stories take place in the same world. And this work, At the Mountains of Madness, is not only one of his most prominent works, but also occupies a central position in his overall fictional universe. So what is the story of At the Mountains of Madness? Well, it is written in the epistolary format, where it presents itself as the testament of an Antarctic explorer, and I'm honestly kind of drawing a blank on what the narrator's name actually is, and I will address the fact of that when I come to the discussion of the characters in this work, but it is presented as the testament of an Antarctic explorer who is writing this in hopes of dissuading a future exploratory expedition to the Antarctic due to the rather Lovecraftian things that they uncovered when they were in the Antarctic. So this group of explorers goes to the Antarctic and they find some giant ass mountains that make like Mount Everest look like a molehill. And then behind those mountains is an abandoned ancient city constructed apparently by some ancient eldritch extraterrestrial beings, some of whom they actually come across. And they explore this city, our narrator and this other guy, and they learn that life on Earth was actually created by these ancient beings, which they refer to as Old Ones, who came down from the stars out of deep space and set up shop on Earth and created an empire, which is now pretty much done, or so they think. And they also created some even more Lovecraftian abominations to serve them as like beasts of burden called shoggoths. Yeah, it's Lovecraft is this is one of his most Lovecraftian works, I guess, if you know what I mean. But anyway, so our narrator and this other guy are exploring this decrepit ancient city of these eldritch alien beings when they come across one of these shoggoths and they have to skedaddle out of there. And they get back in their plane and they fly back over the mountains. But as they do, the narrator's partner looks back out of the window of the plane and sees something so horrifying that it makes him go instantaneously mad and causes him to basically name drop a bunch of other H.P. Lovecraft stories as well. And so that's the story. That's pretty much it. The plot of this is pretty simple. Antarctic exploration goes direly wrong and uncovers some Lovecraftian eldritch abominations, and then they get the heck out, as you do, right? So anyway, that's the plot of At the Mountains of Madness. It is a novella. Lovecraft wrote, predominantly in the shorter formats because he was writing predominantly for magazines. And At the Mountains of Madness is actually one of his lengthier works, but this might break over into actually full-length novel territory, but even if it does, it's still a very short novel. Now, so that's the plot. Let's talk about the technical aspects of it and what I thought about it. So the writing, start with the writing. I said that H.P. Lovecraft might possibly be the greatest writer to come out of the pulp magazines, if only because that's a pretty low bar. But I'm aware that a lot of people don't like H.P. Lovecraft's writing. A lot of people think that he was not a very good writer and they don't like his prose style. I am personally not one of those people. I think Lovecraft actually was a pretty good writer. I admire the fact that he had such a distinct style, because the thing about Lovecraft is that his writing feels archaic. It feels not like something that was written in the 1920s or 30s, but something that was written about 100 years prior to that. It reads more like Hawthorne, more like Melville, more like Poe. It reads like something from the early to mid 1800s. And I really like that. Lots of archaic terminology, lots of old-fashioned words, which a lot of people may find pretentious or corny, but I like it. And honestly, I think Lovecraft could turn a pretty good phrase when he wanted to. Um, I don't really have much problems with the writing of the book. I think Lovecraft was a pretty good writer, actually, or when he wanted to be at least. And I think At the Mountains of Madness is a finely written book, if you appreciate his style at least. So let's talk about the characters next. And this is where we get into the negatives because Lovecraft, you don't read Lovecraft for the characters because the characters in his stories are like to even call them characters is being generous. And At the Mountains of Madness is a prime offender in terms of the flatness of its characters. As I said, I don't really, I'm not even sure what the name of the narrator is in this book. I think it might have been Dyer. I think the narrator's name may have been Dyer, but I'm not even sure because that's the level of impact that these characters have on you because they're just flat as all get out. Anyway, so major points got to knock off for the characters because they ain't much in terms of that in this book, or really in most any of Lovecraft's stories. You come to Lovecraft more for the atmosphere and the effects and the plots, but not so much for the characters. And At the Mountains of Madness will remind you why that is. Also, another aspect of this book that I think was a major shortcoming was the almost total absence of dialogue. Now, in Stephen King's book, which I have over here on writing, he actually addresses the fact that Lovecraft stories feature such little dialogue, and he attributes that to the fact that Lovecraft was, as he would have us believe, not very adept at writing dialogue, that his dialogue was often hokey or unconvincing or kind of inept. And so, as a result of that, Lovecraft often liked to play it safe and not write much dialogue, not try to do things that he wasn't really the best equipped to do. And At the Mountains of Madness would seemingly evince this because even though this is like 120 something pages, there I don't know that there is actually any dialogue. Maybe like one line or two instances at most of dialogue. And yeah, so like 99% of this book is just narration. And that doesn't that doesn't hurt so much in the shorter format stories that Lovecraft wrote, but in this kind of a little bit lengthier format, it kind of hurts. This really could have done with some dialogue. It could only have helped maybe these the personalities of these characters if they had some lines that they delivered, but they don't. It's just entirely almost narration, and I think this really could have benefited from some dialogue. Um, yeah, so the characters, I don't even know that you can say that this has any like true characters in it. It has names, but that's about it. And the total absence of dialogue almost is a knock against it for me personally. But now let's just talk about the overall story of this and the overall vibe, because that's what you come for when you read Lovecraft is the vibe of the stories. And At the Mountains of Madness is possibly one of his most effective works. Um, it really does encapsulate what makes Lovecraft Lovecraft. The writing, take it or leave it depending on your preferences. The characters suck, but when you're reading this story, you really do feel immersed in something truly alien. And that's why Lovecraft is such an influential author because he was able to immerse the reader in something that truly feels foreign, that feels other, that feels again alien. It's so kind of pushing at the edges of what you can even the human mind can even grasp. That is, of course, what cosmic horror, what Lovecraftian horror is all about. It's not about gore or violence or anything like that. It's the fear comes from the unknown and the inability to know. And this is really made manifest in at the ending of the story when the narrator and his partner, his very, very flatly rendered partner, are flying away from the alien city, and the guy looks back and sees something which is so horrifying that he instantly loses his mind. And that's what Lovecraft knew, right? He knew that the scariest thing is oftentimes not what you see, but rather what you don't see. And At the Mountains of Madness really does feel so effective at making you feel like you're in something that is truly eldritch, that's truly, again, alien and just completely foreign, that your mind in such a situation would probably have trouble even fathoming. It's really great. It's really effective. I like the story. It has that kind of creeping, mounting dread that Lovecraft was capable of at his best. That's probably why this is one of his most prominent works. So yeah, At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. I'm going to give At the Mountains of Madness a B. I can't give it an A because the character work is just so lacking. There's not even any effort put into that at all in this, and I get that that's by design, but it still leaves a facet of the literary experience that should normally be addressed just completely missing basically. So I got to knock it for the characters. But the writing, I like Lovecraft's writing. I think he was actually a pretty good writer. I recognize that other people might not, but I don't have any qualms with the writing. And the story it is one of probably Lovecraft's most effective stories at just making you feel like you're being exposed to something just completely other. The abominations, the eldritch horrors that these characters are confronted with. It really does feel distinct from all at the time that this was written, at least probably anything else out there. That's like in science fiction and stuff. um, we're accustomed to seeing like aliens as just like in Star Trek. The aliens in Star Trek are just people with some prosthetic makeup on, and that's pretty much it. It's very humanoid, but Lovecraft's aliens are not humanoid. They're not even anything like humans, and they feel like truly, once again, alien, just truly foreign to all of human experience. And At the Mountains of Madness really is effective at conveying such a vibe, I think. And also the influence of this, because I would say that this is a highly influential work. Right off the top of my head, I might point to like John Carpenter's The Thing, right? Also, a story about Antarctic exploration that unearths some ancient alien nasties that play havoc with their crew, right? But also beyond that, I could point to like Ridley Scott's Alien, the first Alien movie where they actually like find the xenomorph, the thing, inside the body of they're in the alien citadel or whatever, where you as the audience have no clue what any of that means, or at least you didn't until Ridley Scott went back with Prometheus and then ruined the mystery. And also Prometheus, that movie in itself, I think bears a lot of similarities to this, as it's about humans discovering their makers, meeting their makers, so to speak. Because in At the Mountains of Madness, it's pretty apparent that the old ones created all life on Earth, humans included in that. So I think the influence of this is pretty palpable if you're really paying attention in pop culture. But yeah, so I'm going to give it a B. It has weaknesses, mainly with the character work, which is just basically non existent. The writing, once again, I like it. Some people don't. But the story, man, it really is one of the most effectively atmospheric works of Lovecraft's, I think, that you'll encounter. So I'll say this: um, if you're not like into Lovecraft, if you're not a fan of his, this is probably not going to convert you. But if you are and you haven't read this yet, then like this is definitely one you want to pick up, because this is one of the big ones right here. Like I said, this is kind of almost like a centerpiece to his entire fictional shared universe because it pulls in a lot. We have the Necronomicon mentioned a lot in this. We have Cthulhu mentioned in this. And again, at the end of the book, when the guy just loses his mind, he literally just name drops a bunch of other Lovecraft stories. But also, it mentions Kadath, right? So it ties it to like the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, um, another one of Lovecraft's more lengthy works. But yeah, it kind of it's kind of the linchpin, maybe you might say, to Lovecraft's entire body of work, almost maybe. But yeah, so At the Mountains of Madness, I'm going to give it a B. Have you read At the Mountains of Madness? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with any of my takes. And if you haven't read At the Mountains of Madness, like I said, if you're a fan of Lovecraft and you haven't read this yet, definitely give it a go. If you're just wanting to try some Lovecraft, if you've heard a lot about Lovecraft, but you've never tried any of his work, but you want to give something a go, I could recommend picking this up. I think it is very effective in doing what Lovecraft did best, right? And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.